So when you talk about citizen science, a lot depends on which word and how you put the emphasis on the different words. And so the first question that I want to ask is the question: are we just trying to build a big database? So on the website, you see me going on about best July and all those sorts of things, and it's very easy to convey the impression that all we're trying to do is to get a big database. And the answer to that is no. It's not like that at all. So the data are crucial. The more data we have, the better. It is the foundation on which everything depends. But from that this picture in the bottom right-hand corner, where there's influence on the y-axis, the data itself has no influence whatsoever. It's only as it gets transformed into a policy or something like that that it actually has any influence at all. So one of the ways we've long thought about the data we collect is actually rolling it up the hill through all the things that we have to do to get it into, say, a red data book or something like that, where it starts to have influence on government policy. But now we're starting to think a bit differently as well. And another way in which we are influential is just through being citizen scientists and being ambassadors for biodiversity. So there's a few sort of background ideas. The job description of the prophet was not foretelling the future. The job description of the prophet was warning his community or her community that if they carried on behaving the way they did, they were headed for disaster. So in a very real sense, as citizen scientists, we are issuers of that warning, doing the job description of the prophet. If we carry on behaving towards biodiversity the way most of us do, or most people do, we're headed for disaster. So we want to, in some way, encourage biological wealth. Biological wealth is hard to describe, but biological poverty is quite easy to describe. Biological poverty consists of just not grasping the importance of ecosystem services to our very existence. And sadly, we have a whole bunch of presidents around the world who in fact live in biological poverty, and the damage that they are causing to the planet is enormous. So we see citizen science as leading to bio-engagement, bio-wealth, knowing about all these things. That leads to civic awareness, to an understanding of the importance of what we have around about us. And ultimately, we believe that civic awareness leads to democracy. So we have a very big picture of what we're doing when we are doing citizen science. So the participation somehow turns us into these prophets, these ambassadors for biodiversity, warning of the hazards of ignoring the loss of ecosystem services. So yeah, these various terms, the different emphasis, and I'm really embarrassed to say that with the first bird atlas, SAPAP 1, we really did citizen science. So the emphasis was on the science. We just said thank you to the bird atlases. We didn't quite treat them just as observers, human sensors, but it was embarrassing to say it was not a lot better than that. By the time we got onto the second bird atlas, we were a little bit better than that. So it was more or less citizen science, more or less equal emphasis. And in the second bird atlas, we developed this concept of scientists as as ambassadors for biodiversity. But now, as we enter this Biodiversity Development Institute era, we really want to take that concept of ambassadors to a somewhat deeper level, so that we are helping communities develop a sense of appreciation of biodiversity at a grassroots level. So that's very much where we're wanting to take citizen science now. And the real danger is that we do citizen science, so we get so entangled with the social stuff that we lose our focus on the science. So we're very much sensitive to the need to keep the balance. It's really, really important to keep collecting high quality data that we can do the science with. So probably most countries, and I think I'm just being wildly generalizations now, the chasm between what's protected and what's unprotected, what people think about and what they don't think about, I guess it's probably true that most countries don't actually really deeply appreciate biodiversity. There are some countries that have and I think South Africa is amongst them, where government policy considers birds, but not much else. And I think there are some countries in Europe, something like the Netherlands, where they actually not only think about birds, they think about butterflies and dragonflies as well. So there's this chasm between what is in popular perception, which is people, a big following, enthusiastic about these groups. And when you have a big following, enthusiastic about the groups, you have the sort of community awareness of a group of species or of birds or something like that. Then the policy follows, and we have conservation policy for those things. So somehow or other, what we should be trying to do is, in fact, to move the line of the chasm to some lower level. Whatever situation we find ourselves in, let's try and get people to embrace something a little bit lower down on this list of taxa. So I think that what the Nigerian Bird Atlas is achieving, and there was Sam Ivende's talk a few weeks back, and it's on the BDI YouTube channel, the Citizen Science channel, about how they're involving people in bird clubs actually going out and birding. I think they are really succeeding well. A lot of the rest of us have actually failed to actually help move the line of the chasm down a level. So this is Itazo's photo, and Cape Sugarbird, and thank you for saving our habitat. But what do we really mean by saving? And I think what we as citizen scientists have to do is to actually help the landowners to value the habitat that all this biodiversity is on. So that's what I wanted to say, and so thank you very much. Thank you. So I'm happy to answer questions and do anything like that.
Thank you, Les. That was very nice.
Yes.
Yep.
I'd just like to say, this can work at a micro level as well, because one of the things that the Cape Bird Club Conservation Committee has been doing has been collecting data on sewage works, and we've been able to put together quite a nice relationship with obviously with Stonfontein, but also with Athlone and Mitchell's Plain, We've
Right.
delivered them with binoculars, bird books. They become quite interesting. And in fact, at Mitchell's Plain at the moment, they've actually modified the habitat to increase the area available for nesting, for putting down mud flats where waders could use the area. And it's become quite an interesting dynamic there. And we're starting to do the same thing at Athlone. We're hoping to roll it out to one or two other sewage works, but you know, we need the manpower. And but I think I agree with you. And the one thing I always felt is that you can never conserve birds or insects or even some smaller mammals. You can only preserve their habitat. And I think you're quite right. You've got to look at the whole picture and just get people on board. And I think when people realize what's around them, they become much more amenable to it.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Other comments?
Unless you have a question from Kate in the chat.
Okay, right. So I stop sharing and then I can see the questions, I think. Chat.
She's asking if there is any emphasis on the use of the virtual museum data for environmental impact assessment activities.
Yeah. So we have this quite sizable grant from the JRS in the US, and the JRS it kind of tolerates us collecting dragonfly atlas data because they realize that we need the data to do anything. But the JRS is all about transforming data into policy. And we have, quite frankly, as far as I'm concerned, I say this quietly, we have largely failed in that project because it is proved so difficult to actually get dragonflies into policy. And so I'm actually I find it quite hard reporting to them about the project because we just aren't making a difference at that level. Where that dragonfly project is making a difference is actually along with the dragonfly Facebook group and along with Warwick Tarbiton's fantastic dragonfly guidebook. I think the three things are combining together to make dragonflies hugely more popular and get sort of the grassroots interest in dragonflies increased. And I think that's been a huge success. And whether we can actually create that groundswell of enthusiasm for dragonflies, that there's a demand for dragonflies to be taken into account with environmental impact assessments. That's what we're looking for. But it's very hard to actually work from the top down. It's the real secret seems to be working from the bottom upwards and creating this groundswell of enthusiasm for a taxon, which I think has been very successfully done in many parts of the world for birds, and which I think, going back to Nigeria, the Nigerian bird atlas is actually starting to create that groundswell of grassroots support for birds through creating now about 1,000 birders. And you say that's just a handful in a population, but 1,000 people can actually have a huge ripple influence on their communities. It only takes a few percentage of a population to actually be passionate about something, and it makes a big difference to the policy for that group.
Les, could I just make a comment there?
Yeah.
You know, being part of the Odonata community here, you know, that the community has shown incredible growth in recent times, and social media has had a major role to play there. So perhaps what we need to be doing as citizen scientists with a particular interest in Odonata is to try and use the data that's already been collected for the VM, for Odonata map, to, you know, try and answer some environmental questions. And in so doing, will that not, you know, build a bit of momentum that could hopefully achieve what it is that, or, you know, work towards achieving what it is that dragonflies should be doing to be included in policy. Michael Samways' work for many years has looked at the, you know, the environmental correlates of you know, certain groups of dragonflies, or the diversity. He's got this diversity index.
Yeah.
Is there not something that we could look at as a community with the data that we're collecting? I speak for myself. We've got a number of impoundments, or water impoundments, little dams and things on the estate where I live. And the quality of the water is different in the dams. Some are formed from rain runoff. The majority are grey water as part of the estate's grey water system with water circulating. And I just, you know, it's just an idea that I've had, is perhaps one could look at the dragonfly communities, Odonata communities in the different dams, to try and, you know, use that as an index of the level of pollution in the different water bodies. And I don't know whether that could be, you know, utilized, you know, in this attempt to try and influence policy.
Yeah, certainly. That's a really neat idea. One thing we're doing with the data at the moment, and this will appear on that Dragonfly Atlas text, which the drafts are now on the BDI website. Within the next week or so, we'll be adding phenology charts to that, which show the time of the year at which the adult dragonflies are flying. And one of the things that we want to do is, because we've got all the historical data, we can actually perhaps start to look at how the flying times are shifting, or if they are shifting with climate change. And I think that would be quite a nice dramatic thing to do with the data. We can actually pick up changes like that. And we should be able to do the same with butterflies as well. Yeah, I would deeply agree that we've not actually rolled the virtual museum data up the hill where it actually starts making a difference. And so I wish I had you know, sort of 48 hours a day in which to do a lot more analyses, things like that, or a lot more people who would you know, who actually would be passionate about you know, turning this data into information.
Yes, I don't know if you saw there is another question by ringing in the chat.
How we convince the South African government on the use of citizen science data. Yeah, the amazing thing was that the South African government in Sanby actually came to us to do the reptile atlas, the butterfly atlas. So we didn't actually have to convince them, fortunately, at that level. But I wish we knew how to convince the people who design environmental impact assessments, convince them to include taxa other than birds in those environmental impact assessments. And of course, there'd be a lot of resistance to that. But I think it would be something which I think we should really, continue to determinedly to try to do. So I know Ringham has tried to put together a butterfly list for Nigeria, and I guess that's a big challenge.